Hi, guys.
In Facebook world, we're here for the tall and the short of it with
Betsy.
and Jenny.
You didn't do that last week.
I didn't?
No.
Oh, I missed it. So, we
Can't
were
rely
kind of
on
bummed
her.
this morning because we thought maybe we were going to get a snow day, but it wasn't that bad.
We got to do our delay, though.
We did get a delay. Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah. Actually, I just said we're going to have to come at regular time tomorrow, I bet.
Yeah, we probably will. But then we might have snowpocalypse this weekend, I hear.
True story. Well, every, my voice just did something really funny. Every time I check or look on, it's a different total no matter where I look or what's happening. So who knows?
Like I said, it's Indiana. It could change to like, I don't know, tornado.
Who knows?
In a couple of hours.
Yes.
So, okay, well, back to our monthly topic. We are talking about trauma-informed education this month. And so far, we talked about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. Mm-hmm. And last week, we talked about classroom supports, correct? Yeah. We talked about classroom supports last week. So this week, we're going to dive a little bit into a couple of things we want to give you some more detail on, which are disabilities related to trauma. Mm-hmm. So I want to start out by saying that just because a kid has experienced trauma in their life does not mean that automatically means they need an individual education plan or that they need to be in special education. That's not necessarily true. In fact, you're going to have tons of kids in your class in a public school who have experienced trauma but are still regular general ed kids that are performing okay, and they just have better coping mechanisms, or they have support in another part of their life where they're getting good supports and they are doing fine. So just because a kid's experienced trauma doesn't mean they're going to be in special education. But there are disabilities that do come from trauma. So we're going to talk about a few of those today. And I think we want to do another quick disclaimer as well.
Well, and some characteristics of kids who have gone through trauma are very similar to ADHD. And so trauma doesn't cause ADHD.
No.
That is, like we said,
it's hereditary a lot of times,
genetic or
it's just a chemical imbalance.
Yeah.
So it's, they don't really, one doesn't cause the other.
But,
and you were pretty spoiled.
Yeah, I did not have trauma. And sorry, my phone was doing something weird. I wasn't sure what was happening.
Deciding whether it had a connection.
So basically you just, I think oftentimes we see the characteristics and
we jump right to ADHD.
Because that's what's familiar. Mm-hmm. And because why I want this topic, it's newer to me, and so I think it's probably going to be newer to a lot of people. Yeah. And so until we learn about it, we're not going to necessarily say, oh, this could have maybe caused it. Yeah. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Now, that doesn't mean that the child doesn't have, if they've went through trauma, that doesn't mean they don't have ADHD, but it's definitely something you don't want to jump just to that conclusion. And if you are going through the diagnosis process with a medical professional, which it has to be done that way, they should be doing a thorough enough.
Well, and doctors should always be made aware if you're a foster parent or whatever, they should always be made aware of any trauma in the child's past. Yeah. So that they don't misdiagnose those kinds of things.
Hey, Amanda.
Well, hello.
Yeah, so like I said, just good to be aware of. And
there's a lot of symptoms that overlap though between kids who've experienced trauma and ADHD. So all right, so let's get into the big three, which, I mean, in my mind, these are the big three of disabilities that could be caused by a child who's gone through trauma. So the first one is something we call RADS, which is Reactive Attachment Disorder, or RAD. Now, basically what that means is when the baby was born, they did not have an opportunity to bond with their primary caregiver. So whether that be the biological mother, father, they never had the opportunity to bond with that parent. So either through abuse and neglect or other reasons, they're a ward of the state and they just never had the opportunity to bond. Now, sometimes that can also happen If the child is born addicted, or not addicted, that they're exposed and they are going through withdrawal to drugs, because when they're in that NICU environment, that's why it's really important for parents to be allowed in the NICU and be able to touch them and, with all that stuff in the NICU, because they need to have that bonding that happens. So, but mostly it's through abuse and neglect that they have, that they don't get that bond with the caregiver. So what ends up occurring is that it actually changes their brain to where they have a really, really hard time feeling true affection or caring. They have a hard time with empathy. So what that's going to look like in your classroom is they aren't going to care about consequences unless those are natural consequences. So like if these are kids that aren't afraid of authority figures at all. They will take it as far as you can push them. Like if you're like, I'm going to get the principal, they're like, I don't care. If the principal's like, if you don't do this, you're getting suspended, they'll be like, I don't care. If you if you go, I'm going to call the cops, they're going to be like, do it. Yeah. They do not have any fear of people in authority. And so really behavior plans don't work for them in the traditional sense. So you have to find strictly natural consequences. You made a mess, you're going to have to clean it up. You didn't come to school, well, now you have all this work you're going to have to make up, and we're going to find a way for you to do that. I mean, you just have, everything has to be a natural consequence. Giving punitive measures does absolutely nothing. And truly, one of the kids that I've dealt with RADS, especially in middle and high school, his mother, who is amazing and has learned everything there is to know about RADS, she basically told me, if he doesn't do the work, give him a 0. He's got to see that the natural consequence of not doing your work is you're going to fail, which means you have to retake a class. And that's the only way he's going to learn that I'm not going to get my way. Because all the way through school prior to that, his response was, why should I do my homework? They're going to pass me as long as I pass I-STEP. And he was right about that. So he did nothing and failed all his classes because he knew as long as he passed I-STEP, because he's very smart, that he was going to get moved forward. And that was actually true. So, but when he got to high school, he had to learn the very natural way that you don't get the credit, you have to retake the credit. And then once he learned that, he was like, oh, okay. So, but RADS kids are very likely to be in trouble with the law, to be on probation. They're very likely to not finish high school because they just won't conform to demands that are placed upon them. It is pointless to get in an argument with a kid with RADS. They are going to stay stubborn to the end. So just being aware that you can attempt to create a bond with them. If they like you and respect you enough, they will probably be better for you. But if you tick them off, they're going to hold a grudge till the end of time. So like just that relationship piece, even though they're not really capable of true empathy and they don't really have a conscience, so to speak, about a lot of things, you can at least be semi on their good side. So I don't know. There's more, and not all RADS kids are the same.
No, and
there's
I
varying
can say
degrees.
What she's talking about, and I haven't had a child with this older. I've had them younger, and I will say it sounds very daunting, which it is.
It is.
But I also want to say, from my experience, building that relationship with them, working on that, it's not about big gestures. It's just about small things that, in all honesty, you think probably aren't doing, you're like, this is nothing. Whether it be like holding the child's hand as you're walking down the hallway. Things like that.
That's kind of huge for them.
Go along, yes. And because really at this point, they have no trust in anyone.
No.
And so you're building that. And it's not a fast process.
No.
At all.
Right. And if at all possible, if there's a situation where that child can loop with a teacher they have a good relationship with for more than 1 year, they're even going to make more growth.
And I also think once they've built some of that, a relationship with someone, then you kind of start using that to build more. You don't just send them off to go here. You go build a new relationship with someone brand new. You kind of put it together.
Takes a lot of time.
But again, like Jenny said, not all kids are created equal. Just in general, obviously.
Sure.
But kids with RADs, and so I'm actually thinking of 2 different students right now. And what I just said about holding the hand, I can honestly say it worked for one student. I don't know that it would have worked for the
other.
Other. I could be wrong. I don't know, but
most of the things that they want are access to preferred items. So if you're trying to put some sort of behavior plan together, sometimes they'll work for a preferred item or something they want.
And something that's a good way to build that rapport, though, would be when they get the preferred item, you piggyback it with using that preferred item with you.
Yeah.
So they get the preferred item, but they also, you can ask about the item. You can start talking about, you're letting them lead that time together. But those are,
for sure.
Like I said,
these kids are hard. Like I said, I would never, the people who choose to be foster parents for kids who have reactive attachment disorder are saints in my book, because you just can't know how hard it must be as a parent to care for and love and really want the best for a child that really can't give you that back.
And those parents are going to be your best resource. Because like I said, I'm sitting here going, oh, I don't know if that would work, and that they're going to be your resource. And granted, if they just got them, they're going to be learning as well. But definitely keep that communication going, because what's happening at home and what they're seeing is going to be, and vice versa. You guys are going to be able to help each other out.
Right. Lots of communication, because they find the loophole in everything, and they will try to play you off of each other if home and school are not communicating, for sure. All right, so that's RADs.
All right, well, the next one, also a tough one, selective mutism. And it can look different for different kids. Some kids just won't talk, period, no matter who. Really, that would be more mutism, not selective. But but also they can talk. They can maybe choose to talk to just one person. They maybe just choose to talk at home.
Or they only talk to peers.
Right. And it could also at times, just because a child doesn't typically talk to you and maybe one day they do, doesn't mean you should expect it from then on. So a child who has selective mutism, like I said,
they can talk.
Yes, they can, and but they choose not to.
No.
And
it's under the DSM-5, which is your medical diagnosis. This child can talk. However, it is an anxiety disorder. So they have huge anxiety about talking in certain situations. And pointing out that they're not talking just makes it worse.
So you, yes, it's honestly, in my experience, I've never pointed out that they're not talking or that they're talking. I might ask a question. I give wait time. Something I did end up doing was I often tried to just start out with basic yes or no questions, and then I would hold up. I would just say, ask the question, do you want pizza, for lunch? Yes, no, and then they would
she could give you a high five.
They would point to me or whatever.
So,
and
allowing them to use nonverbal gestures and other options, even writing. I have worked with a student who she emails her teacher. She won't talk to them, but she will email them. So,
and I have had in the past, like there may be a day I found that it happened in small group, and it was the same group every day, and we kind of followed the same routine. Every now and then I would get a response, and but it was random and just
you have to be really careful not to praise them when they do talk, because immediately that will shoot their anxiety back up through the roof, and then you're not going to hear from for
and
a
this
while.
is a place too that I think, I mean, sometimes I think it's nobody else's business how you go about, like in your classroom and stuff, handling certain things. But I do know that if a child is maybe speaking to peers, a lot of times, like, the kids would come back and say, you know, oh, they were talking to me at recess, and I'm like, okay, great, yeah, you're her friends, you know, that kind of thing. And it's like, you just play it off because, again, you don't give it the attention. It's like, hey, that's great, yeah, that's not a big deal, that's why would you know, that's just, you just let it go.
You just have to, I mean, pressuring the child to talk when she doesn't want to or he doesn't want to is not helpful.
In the classroom and stuff, I know, like, a big struggle is, okay, well, how do I find out where this child is academically? Math and that kind of stuff isn't all that difficult. But, like, with reading, that can obviously, which right now with all the technology we have, it has become so much better and nice, you know, easier. And a lot of times, like, if the child will talk in a certain setting, like maybe they'll talk at home, then you just record them reading what you need them to read at home. And
yes,
or in all honesty, as they get older, you don't need them to read aloud for you. Read and take a comprehension, you know.
They'll usually write what their response is.
So, but those are definitely things that we have used in the past where, like, let's record
them doing it in an environment where they're talking. I mean, we had a saint of a teacher at one point who actually would go to the child's home to do assessments. And she would talk to her in that environment. She just wouldn't do it at school. So that was really cool.
So, and it's one of those things that you work on how we can ease that anxiety, you work on things like that, but know that you may never, your end goal should not be, how do I get this child to talk?
Right.
That should not be your end goal. Your end goal should be, is this child feeling safe? Is this child's anxiety, you know, to the point that they're comfortable here with us, that kind of thing. And then you're looking at, how can I modify things, or how can I adjust things so that I can, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you don't want to, the child, I'm saying as a school.
I'm saying as a school is not professionally qualified to counsel a child through selective mutism. So just know that from the get-go. They're very specialized therapists that deal with that outside of school. So if a child has that is not the school's responsibility to get them to talk.
So, I wasn't saying you shouldn't, like, oh, don't ever, I'm just saying, like, that as a school. And so that as a school, your focus is working on that child feeling comfortable.
Exactly. So it is, like I was saying, it's an anxiety disorder, but the function of their behavior is control. So that's how they control and feel safe, is I can control this, you can't make me talk. And so that's their coping skill, that's their survival strategy. Because remember, whenever a child goes into that anxiety mode, they're in that fight or flight part of their brain, or freeze, which in this case, I can control and feel safe if I'm not speaking. So that's a piece of that. The other thing to remember in a school environment is safety, because this child's not going to talk to a stranger or like another school staff member even. If they, like, let's say, I can give you an example. You have two different elementary buildings, one for your primary and one for your intermediate. The child moves from the primary building to the intermediate building, and the first day of school, she comes in, new environment, she doesn't, really know, she knows the kids, but she doesn't really know the staff or anything like that. There needs to be a plan in place for when she gets off the bus, how is she going to get to her classroom, and how are the people in the building going to know where she belongs if she gets lost? Because, like, she's not going to know the whole building right away. So making sure that she's always got someone with her that can help her or transition her to that new environment, because we know she's not going to talk to a stranger. If the stranger says, hey, what are you trying to do? Or if she's standing by her locker crying, she's not going to tell an adult what's wrong, if she can't get her locker combination undone, or she can't, things like that. So always thinking what is going to be parts of the transition she might struggle with, he or she, and then putting a plan in place for any kinds of big transitions.
And something else to remember or note. Sorry, I'm going to undo this so we know where
we're at.
It's always important not to underestimate their intelligence because they're not talking.
Right.
So because they're not, chances are they're not talking because of like, oh, I can't do this. I don't know what to do, so I'm just not going to say anything. No.
Sure.
Don't underestimate that because they, you know.
Which means when you go to test them for a special education IEP, you're going to have a psychologist who's going to be willing to do alternative testing that's nonverbal. So you're not going to get a cognitive score based on verbal comprehension. I mean, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. But that is very important because it is, I know that it's just, you know, oh, well, if they're not outputting any information, then there must not be any information for them for them to output. And that is definitely not the case. And it is also good we talked about relationships. You have to build that relationship because while they may not be verbalizing, they are good nonverbal communicators, and you pick up on those cues, and you know, and you learn to read what, you know, thoughts or not thoughts. Wouldn't that be great? Oh my gosh! But you definitely can pick up on feelings and you know, that kind of thing.
Sure. Where
they maybe anxiety levels and that kind of thing. You pick up on some of those. So that is definitely something to point out.
Okay, so we talked about RADS, we talked about selective mutism. The third kind of bigger category is more of a catch-all, but it's one of our 13 categories of special education. It's called an emotional disability. So sometimes emotional disabilities can arise from trauma. And how that occurs is because the definition of an emotional disability is that the student, over a long period of time, and to a marked degree, which that's the language in the law, to a marked degree, meaning more than normal, right, reacts in ways that aren't normal in normal situations. So, you know, he loses something and he cries uncontrollably.
Or doesn't bring his pencil to class and
loses it.
Yeah.
Or just things that are very simple, or things that are no big deal, they make a big deal about. So, or reasonable requests, they have complete overreactions to. And that can be seen in two ways. Again, externalizing behaviors, which are the big cry, meltdown, hide under the table, all that stuff, versus extreme withdrawal, which is going to be on the side of they shut down, they cry, they may just, you know, freeze and not work for you, those kinds of things. Exactly. And anxiety and depression can also fit into this as well. So, but a lot of times emotional disabilities are mental health issues related to trauma, you know, that either they've been through or things like that. So if they've been in an environment where a lot of those ACEs, those adverse childhood experiences have happened, they develop coping skills that are survival skills in that environment, whether that be yelling, cursing, aggression, you know, whatever those things are, which are not normal responses to adverse situations. So, like I said, just being aware that your kids with emotional disabilities, it may have arised from trauma. Now, that being said, because I kind of mentioned anxiety and selective mutism, and I mentioned anxiety and emotional disabilities, but anxiety also, depending on its milder forms, can fit under other health impairment too. So you kind of had some leeway.
Anxiety is like the jack of all trades.
Right.
It just takes care of it all.
And you have to decide, when you have a kid with selective mutism, would they better be served under that emotional disabilities label, or would they better be served under the other health impairment label, depending on their level of need? I would say the more support they need, they might need to be under that emotional disability label. So that's kind of a case conference decision when you get down to it, and how much it affects their educational impact, the impact in their education.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. And then, well, you had said the big 3. This one's not, this would be 4.
It is a 4th, but it's different.
Yes, it is. So the other traumas that we have talked about are traumas that have occurred during the child's life since they've been born.
Right.
Since they came into this world. Well, the next one would be fetal alcohol syndrome, or any thing that was caused by drug use while they were in utero.
Mm-hmm.
And
so that's a different kind of trauma.
Yes.
But it's still a trauma to the baby while they're in the womb.
And can have lasting effects,
right?
That are on the person, on the child, that affects them just in life, but also, in here we are discussing educational type, impacts on education. So definitely, these can impact, a student's education. And again, Jenny might disagree with me on this one, but I kind of feel like it's one of those, it impacts kids differently. I think to the degree, it can affect them at different levels, severities. That's what I'm looking at. Severity.
Yeah, everything's a spectrum.
Yes, and so, and I here's something else that's difficult, where we can look at fetal alcohol syndrome, and typically you have a diagnosis of this because of there are physical characteristics that can be used to determine that. When we look at trauma caused by some drug use, often there isn't the physical characteristics with that, and it's more cognitive
or neurological.
Well, that's what I meant, neurological.
General.
And so it is a lot harder, and depending on, you're often not going to have.
Sometimes you won't know that that's the case either, because if the child is still with the biological parents, it's not like they're going to admit
that's what I was going to say. Yeah, they don't. And so you may know. And here's, I think, maybe how we found this out is where you have children, like foster children or adopted children, who have been evaluated, for special education, and you look at those results, I can say I don't know if there starts to become a pattern. So when you see it in other ones that you're like, wait, well, we don't know anything about this, but hey, this could be a possibility.
Sure.
So it's something that we may know, but it just is a extra information that
the big giveaway for me with working with a lot of kids with different disabilities is that kids with fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, they don't understand cause and effect very well. So not only that, they usually have some issues with verbal comprehension. So there could be some language impairments kind of moving along with it, because they have a hard time understanding and processing verbal directions. Just like kids with ADHD. So like I said, these things overlap everywhere. But the big thing for me for fetal alcohol spectrum disorders is cause and effect. If this, then that. That's probably the hardest concept for them. This is a kid who is going to do a behavior, have a behavior, then he's going to get in trouble for it, and he's going to look at you like he has no idea why he just got in trouble. Like, or what? Like, why am I in trouble? Like, they don't understand, you did this, so this is going to happen. And without lots of direct teaching and repetition, consequences, understanding consequences are so hard. Like, they're going to be the kid who puts the stopper in the bathtub and turns the water on and then gets distracted, walks away, and they don't realize that eventually that tub's going to overflow. Like, that does not occur to them in the moment. And they just...
No, and that's not to say, if you said, what's going to happen if I put this in there, you ask that question.
Right.
They probably can tell you.
Yeah, given wait time, they can probably tell you.
They can tell you, but it's a matter of they don't walk themselves through that process.
That is not part of their thought process. Hey, I better not, do this thing because I might fall.
Yes.
Or I better not go with these kids to this place, even though, like, they don't see that if I do that I could get in trouble. Or maybe there's just all kinds of things like that just... it doesn't click right away for them.
Right.
And they have to have direct instruction on a lot of those if-then things.
Right.
That qualifier is so hard for them to understand. And so there is a lot of statistics out there, and there's been studies done about how many people with fetal alcohol effects or fetal alcohol spectrum disorders are actually sitting in jails right now, because they truly did not understand. If I drive the car for these people that are going to drive this place, then I'm going to go to jail too. Like, they didn't get that.
Yeah.
And they just don't see the consequence until the consequence already happens.
Yeah.
So that can be a struggle. Like I said, social norms are very hard for them. So
Okay, I'm gonna go grab the book you just brought me.
Oh yeah, no problem.
So I can show it.
So as always, if you have questions about any students or like specific disabilities that are maybe related to trauma, definitely put them down there, and we'll see if we can't find the answers for you. And I brought Betsy a present today. It's her very own Help for Billy book. We had copies, and then I gave mine away to someone, and then I think she just had hers on a Kindle or something.
Yeah.
So I got her a paper copy today. That we're really excited. I also bought, there's a companion book to it. It's in my bag over there.
Sorry.
But it's on trauma-informed schools for administrators and school staff. So I'm super excited about that, and I'm going to be sharing some information with that.
Well, and it's already passed for this year, but there's even a trauma-informed school conference.
Right, and we're hoping that next year it's still in California, because that would be fun.
Yeah. It was in Sacramento this year, but
but there's so many great statistics about when you implement strategies for trauma-informed classrooms and schools, that your graduation rates go up, your suspension expulsion rates go down, your what were some of the other stats that I just showed you in there?
Well, I would say I don't know that this is
absences.
In there.
That was one of them.
But I would say it would be interesting. This isn't, they're tracking educational stuff, but it would be interesting to note the the illegal activity afterwards. I don't know how you track that, but
exactly.
To me, that'd be interesting. Somebody do that.
Yeah. So next week, when we come back, I think next week, what are we talking about? Next week we're talking about, do you have our graphic?
Somewhere.
Yes. I should have been prepared with that.
I hope you're better prepared for this snowstorm we're getting.
I'm not.
Me
I'm
neither.
not at all. And I'm not looking forward to having to try to go to the store in any way, shape, or form.
You know what I figure? Maybe Mom will see this. If it gets too bad, I'll just call Dad and be like, "Come get me. I'm going to eat your food." Hey, look, there we are.
Is it in our pictures? Oh, I
don't know. It's right there.
There it is.
We are so
Next,
on it.
hard to reach students. What to do? Yes.
We are so professional.
Yeah.
I mean, so professional.
That's right, Jake. We don't want to get in trouble like we did last time.
Oh.
So
I gotta read.
But next time, we're gonna talk.
You're
about
not ready. Come on, Jake.
You're not ready either.
How many loaves of bread do you have? I mean, come on. I don't have any. I don't ever buy loaves of bread.
A loaf. I don't know. So hard to reach students. What to do? We're gonna talk about those kids that you're just like, I am pulling my hair out. We have tried everything. What in the world are we gonna try next?
You're not ready. She has half a loaf. You're more ready than her, though.
Yeah, probably. So we're going to talk about those kids next week and what some options are for them if they are just not making it, and what we need to do about that as a school. What our responsibility is as a school when they're not making it in that least restrictive environment. So, all right. Until next week, we are going to sign off, and we'll see you next time for the tall and the short of it.
Bye, guys. I always raise the wrong hand. Or wave.
We need a bloopers reel. Let's do that. You'll cyber see us.
All right. Bye, Jake.